What is up, world? It's your boy Ton, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. So last week, we talked about gross leases and modified gross leases. This week, we're going to pivot to net leases, and these things are absolutely badass. Why? Because they shift some of the financial responsibilities to the tenant, like property insurance, property taxes, and common area maintenance, or CAM. Net leases come in different flavors, but the common thread is that you're going to be seeing tenants picking up more of that tab versus everything being on you. In the net lease world, we're going to have three nets. We're going to have taxes, insurance, and CAM, or common area maintenance once again. Picture this. You've got your base rent, just like in a gross lease or a modified gross lease, but here is where it actually gets interesting. Your tenant is also going to be responsible for a slice of the financial pie, either in taxes, insurance, or CAM. And that's all going to be based on how much space they're occupying and the percentage of the entirety of the property. So with a single net lease, they're going to be taking care of one of those nets. Let's bring it up in an example. So we have John, who's a tenant. We have Sarah, who's a landlord. In our scenario, John's going to be paying Sarah $500 per month for 24 months as his base rent. And let's also say that the space of the entire property is 2,000 square feet. And John is going to be occupying 1,000 square feet of that. So roughly 50% of the whole building. Now, in this single net lease scenario, John's going to be on the hook for property taxes, insurance, or CAM once again. So we're going to say he's going to be on the hook for just taxes. So since he's occupying 50% of the building, he's going to be on the hook for 50% of the property taxes. So let's say property taxes for the entire property is $6,000 a year. So you divide $6,000 by 2 and you get $3,000 per year. And that's going to come out to about $250 per month. So his base rent, once again, is $500 per month. And since it's a net lease, he's going to be responsible for another $250. So if you're a landlord considering this type of lease, it's a way to ensure some financial stability for yourself while also giving your tenant a bit of the responsibility. And as for tenants, it might mean a lower base rent with some shared expenses. And like I said, in the past episode, I spoke about modified gross leases. And you're probably thinking, hey, aren't modified gross leases and net leases kind of similar? And you'd be kind of spot on. But the main difference boils down to who's responsible for the costs. In modified gross leases, costs are shared between the landlord and the tenant, while in net leases, tenants are generally footing the entire bill. So in John's and Sarah's example, if Sarah's building was a single tenant building and John was occupying the entire space and it was a single net lease, he'd be responsible for 100% of the taxes. So let's transition to double net leases. In a sense, it's very similar to single net leases, but it has a little bit of extra flavor. So in this lease, the tenant's not only picking the tab up for one of the nets, but they're taking up two of the nets. So we're going to take that past example with John and Sarah. So John is currently paying Sarah $500 a month for his base rent for 24 months. But instead of just paying for his proportion of the taxes, he's going to get tacked on with, say, the property insurance as well. And in this scenario, we're going to say he's still occupying 50% of the space. So he's responsible for 50% of the property insurance. Let's say the property insurance for this particular property is $3,000 a year. Once again, since he's occupying 50%, he'll be responsible for 50% of that $3,000, which is $1,500 per year, which comes out to $125 per month. So his total in rent payment would be $500 for his base rent, $250 for the taxes, and then another $125 for the property insurance, which puts his total at $875 per month. So double net leases are a little bit more hands-on for the tenant, but they offer a balanced approach between the landlord and the tenant responsibilities. And lastly, we have triple net leases. And this is probably the most favorite type of lease among all the big players in commercial real estate. Triple net leases are essentially the VIP section of leases, and they're going to attract national or credit tenants like Walgreens, McDonald's, and Costco. I mean, who doesn't love Costco, right? But these leases are the go-tos for the big names. And the leases are going to be a little bit longer in length, probably 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and they'll probably have a potential to extend. Most of the time, they're probably also going to come with rent escalations over the period of the base rent. All right, so let's dish out what's on the menu for the tenants. In a triple net lease, they're going to be covering all three of the nets. So the insurance, the taxes, and the common area maintenance. That's right, they're getting the whole enchilada. Now, for you as a landlord, you're going to be taking care of the building's structural integrity. Think mechanicals like the HVAC system, the plumbing, the roof, and the foundation. And you're also going to be the one who's going to be making sure that the exterior of the building is pretty. So basically, you got the big ticket items, while the tenants are going to be handling the smaller ongoing expenses. So with another example, let's say once again we have John and Sarah. John is leasing out space from Sarah. His base rent still $500 a month over 24 months. Now, Sarah's not going to let him off easy, and she's going to hit him with a triple net lease. So on top of his base rent, John's going to be covering taxes, insurance, and CAM. So in our previous example, the taxes came out to $500 a month. His insurance was $250 a month. But now the common area maintenance is going to be another $150 a month. So if you add all of that up, his monthly bill is going to be $1,400. Yep, you heard that right, $1,400. A lot of times in triple net, when it comes to the condition of the property, the roof and HVAC systems are pretty much the showstoppers. If you have a shiny new roof and an updated HVAC, tenants are going to love the building. They're going to sign that dotted line with a smile. But on the other hand, if they're showing some age, these tenants are going to be a little bit more cautious. They're going to be looking for a more conservative lease to protect them because your repair costs are going to be potentially high. Triple net leases can be a win-win, but it's all about the details and keeping those properties in tip-top shape. So whether you're a tenant eyeing a long-term deal or if you're a landlord looking to attract the big names, you got to understand the triple net leases. Now, you're probably wondering, why would a tenant take on a triple net lease if it's, more expensive, if they have more responsibilities? Well, firstly, they would get a lower base rent. And secondly, unlike the multifamily guys who can pretty much flexibly adjust their rates every year, the commercial leases operate under a different set of rules. They are locked to, once again, the 5, 7, 10-year agreements. So you kind of have to follow those terms and renewal options that you've already agreed upon at the beginning. So imagine a recession hits and your property's vacancy just skyrockets. So a tenant with an upcoming renewal option, they're probably going to propose, okay, I'll stay if I can pay $10 per square foot instead of the agreed upon 15, because now the building is pretty much vacant. So you as a landlord, you might find yourself with limiting negotiating power because they're holding pretty much all the cards in a scenario like this. Unless somehow you strategically included provisions that tie the renewals to economic indices like the Consumer Price Index or the CPI. So at the end of the day, when you negotiate long-term leases, those typically benefit the tenants. Now, you're probably wondering, how does that benefit the landlord? Well, the most significant benefit of triple net leases to landlords is that you'll be able to transfer variable maintenance costs to the tenants, especially during unpredictable situations like the COVID season that we just had, when everything pretty much went up in price. At the end of the day, this arrangement effectively minimizes your risk by shifting the expenses to the tenant, which is why triple net leases are such an attractive option for both parties. In the example with Sarah and John, where she owns an office building that's leased to John for that $500 a month base rent, if there was not a triple net lease scenario and the property taxes increased by, let's say, another $500 a year, Sarah would be responsible for covering the additional expense, which means she's probably going to lose a month of base rent. And once again, John's base rent was $500 a month. However, if the office property is subject to a triple net lease, the responsibility for that expense is then shifted to John. So this ensures that Sarah's cash flow remains unaffected, and it provides a predictable NOI, or a net operating income, and she knows how much profit she's going to be making from the property. At the end of the day, understanding the ins and outs of all of these lease types are going to help both you as the landlord and the tenant, because it's going to clarify any financial obligations that each party has. And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.